Despite what you're hearing nationally, Ole Miss beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl wouldn't be an upset. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America. That is all because of you. And on today's show, we're going to dig into this strange but very real thing that's surrounding this matchup. Ole Miss is playing with absolutely zero pressure, but this game is a lot closer of a matchup than the experts would have you believe. The national assumption is that Georgia is going to be simply too much for Ole Miss because of what happened earlier in the season in Athens, but context matters, honestly. This will be the longest road trip that Georgia has taken all season long, and their road slate has frankly been forgiving, with nearly every difficult game played at home. Because of that, we're going to start with this very simple premise. If Ole Miss wins this game, it should not be considered an upset, and analytics point to that. Because of that, there are legitimate factors working in the Rebels' favor, and when you stack them all up, this game could realistically go either direction. If Ole Miss pulls it off, it wouldn't surprise me at all. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is, and that is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket. Game Time would be very helpful for you if you are looking for Sugar Bowl tickets at the moment. So, Ole Miss versus Georgia. Ole Miss has no chance. That's the national narrative. Heck, I think the Locked On Bulldogs people said that Ole Miss was outclassed and Ole Miss was a total joke, and Ole Miss is going to actually regret the moment that they stepped on a football field with the Georgia Bulldogs, which makes no sense. It's stupid. That's dumb. But what you have is a situation where Ole Miss was 4th and 2 away from beating the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. As bad as they played defensively, the way everything else went in that game, Ole Miss was 4th and 2 away from beating the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens. But the narrative is going to be, because of the way the Georgia offense rolled that day, that Georgia completely outclassed the Ole Miss team. And you're going to hear all the time, it's like Georgia's gotten better over the course of the season. So is everybody that's in this position. Every team is better right now, with the exception of maybe Texas A&M, than they were October 14th or whenever the date was. That's just the way this works. Ole Miss has scored 30-plus points in 7-plus games. They've won big game after big game after big game, must-win scenarios as the season has progressed. They've gotten better. And the defense has gotten many, many times better than what was shown at the Georgia game that day. So when you look at this game, Ole Miss has a better chance to win it than you think. When you look at the ESPN FBI, I think they put the win probability for Georgia at 60%. So that's 2 out of every 5 games that ESPN's FBI thinks that Ole Miss is going to win. 3 games won for Georgia, 2 games for Ole Miss. That's how that win probability would look. You look at scores that are happening. The college football nerds, who I like to go to them to see the advanced stats in the course of the game. They have the model prediction of this game at about 3 points. A field goal one way or another. It could be a Georgia touchdown at the end. They've got it at 2.8 points is the difference between Georgia and Ole Miss. Their final score prediction is 32.6 to 29.8. I do agree with the model that I think this game is going to be a little bit lower scoring than the Ole Miss Georgia game was in Athens. And I think that it's going to be lower scoring than that, if we're going to be honest. the team comparisons of what's going on, they said the spread between Ole Miss and Georgia, this is from Sharp College Football, has the spread at 1.56. The win probability for Georgia is at 55%. That's less than the ESPN FPI has it. The point is, this game is a lot closer statistically than the experts are saying. When you look at what's going on, Ole Miss has the horses to win this game. It's one of those things to where they're not outclassed. They're not a total joke. They were literally one play from defeating the Georgia Bulldogs in October in Athens. Now, this game is going to be farther away than Georgia's gone to any football game this season. And last season, in this exact same situation that Georgia had, they lost to Notre Dame. This setup is ripe for a win for Ole Miss, an upset, I guess, if you want to follow the national narrative. I don't think it would be an upset. I think Ole Miss can play with Georgia. I think Ole Miss can score with Georgia. And if you get to a point, you can put Georgia away. Ole Miss had some problems in the first game with essentially time of possession. Georgia did a very good job of playing slow. They kept the ball for 37 minutes. Ole Miss just didn't stay on the field very often. In the fourth quarter, when that game went all pear-shaped, it was 2 3-and-out drives by Ole Miss, and Georgia kept it the rest of the fourth quarter. That is how that game deteriorated. But for 3 quarters, Ole Miss was right where they wanted to be, and they were playing terribly defensively. If they put together a perfect game, which they don't have to do, but if they do that, they'll beat Georgia. I have no doubt about that. The key to beating Georgia, and we're going to talk about this as Friday gets here. I think Friday we're going to do the keys. On Monday, we're going to do what to watch for and those things for everybody, since this is a weird week. But one of the keys in this game, just like the first game, is the run game is everything. You cannot allow Georgia to go 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 1st and 10, 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, 1st and 10, because they're just going to eat clock. All of that, they're going to keep on the field with their tremendous athletes. They have a great set of athletes. They are the gold standard in college football for a reason. But you can't allow them to do that. You need to get them in long yardage and get them off the field. And it was awesome to hear Pete Golding at the press conference last week say the exact same thing. I was pretty fired up to hear that, because something that we had been saying was actually repeated by the head coach, and that is really cool. But if you can stop that and force Gunnar Stockton to complete big 3rd down passes without the benefit of Athens, Georgia at your back, we're going to talk about that the next segment. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous what they have. We're going to talk about that. But put the game on Gunnar Stockton's arm, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. Now, Georgia's a very good team. They are. It's every team in the final 8 in the college football playoff is a very good team. So this isn't overlooking. This is just confidence, honestly. This is just knowing the fact that Daquan Wright was better than anybody else on the field the first time these two teams met, and that matchup is going to be available this time as well. And you have other players that are supremely gifted athletically. Knowing all of that gives you the confidence to think of what's going on. And when you look at the advanced stats and the advanced metrics, 1.5 3-point games, that ballpark, the Lions have it right now as Georgia favored by 6.5. It is going down. It is going down. But the lines are currently at 6.5 for the Georgia Bulldogs. I like where Ole Miss sits. I like the rematch factor of all this. We're going to talk about all of that stuff coming up in just a little bit. So stick around for that. You know, Georgia's road slate this year was, in a word, soft. And even then, most of those games were right on Georgia's border. Look it up. I mean, the farthest they had to travel other than Mississippi State was like 90 minutes outside of the Georgia border. We'll talk about that next. Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place the bets on action as it unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump on this moment. They have live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly, player props that update as guys heat up. You can bet on the next touchdown score, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your Twitter or your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, so can you. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing but keeps all of this free. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network nationally. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemist.supercast.com or check the link down in the show notes to learn more. All right, so whenever you look at the advanced stats, you see that Ole Miss is sitting close. We talked about that early on, the predictive scores and all of the metrics they look at. It's smaller. It's inside the point spread right now, and that's kind of where you want to be. The national narrative is because of what happened in that Georgia game, especially defensively, they're worried about that, so it's probably worth a couple of extra points as well. But Ole Miss at about a field goal range, according to the model, underdogs, according to college football nerds and others. And one thing that's interesting that I don't know gets enough play, and it might just be Georgia's reputation or whatever, it could be fine. But Georgia this season has had a fairly Charmin extra soft road schedule. And this is what I mean. The farthest they have traveled this year was to 1-7 Mississippi State. Now they beat Mississippi State 41-21. I'm not saying they didn't win the game. I'm saying that that's the farthest they've gone. The other road games they went to was to Jacksonville, Florida, which is right across the border from Georgia. They went to Auburn, which is right across the border from Georgia. And they went to Knoxville, which is about 90 minutes across the border from Georgia. We haven't seen a situation to where Georgia's had to play a game where they didn't need to bus to it. They actually had to hop on an airplane and handle what's going on. Now, I understand that they've done all of this before. Gunnar Stockton is going to be playing a game in a Sugar Bowl for the second time. This is one, I think this is the first start that Gunnar Stockton can kind of repeat, and with a game against Ole Miss and a game in the Sugar Bowl. There's a comfortability factor, all of that. I get it, all of that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, it was 10-0 against Auburn. Auburn was up, and Auburn was on the 1-yard line, and there was a fumble, and that turned that game. Auburn going in could have put it away. They made that play. They made the play against Ole Miss that ended up saving them there. They made the play against the Florida Gators that ended up saving them there in Jacksonville. They made the play against the Tennessee Volunteers that ended up saving them there. I understand. Don't take anything away from them. They made the plays. It just didn't accidentally happen. I get that. But the law of averages say you're not going to make that play consistently. And whenever you make it 4 or 5 times over the course of the season, the odds are it's going to come back and bite you at some point, whether it's against Ole Miss, whether it's against Ohio State or Miami, which would be funny if it was Miami and Carson Beck, but that's a whole other reason. Whether it's against Alabama, again, if they played in the national championship, which I think everybody would ride if it's Georgia versus Alabama for the national championship. There's a chance, several chances, because you're playing good teams right now on the road, that something bad's going to happen and you're not going to make that play that you've been making all season long. I get it. Supremely talented athletes, all of that stuff. but you can't keep putting yourself in position to where they have to do it, where they have to make a play. Because what happens is eventually they won't, no matter how good they are. Listen, last season, Ole Miss had a 12-0 roster. Georgia fans that are watching this podcast, they know exactly how good that roster was because you got to see that Ole Miss roster at its absolute best. But the problem is whenever those plays had to be made, they didn't make them. That doesn't take away the talent. That doesn't take away anything else other than the fact that you lost football games because you didn't make a play. Whether by luck or otherwise, a player falling down, somebody getting pushed off on. This weird stuff can happen on a play when you have to make a play. Georgia's made it thus far this season. They've made those plays, whether it's punching out a fumble on a quarterback sneak or stopping or breaking a tackle to get 2 yards on a 4th and 2 to save the game. They have made those plays. One of these games, they're not going to. Just the law of averages say that. With the road that is coming up for Georgia, starting with Ole Miss, which we talked in the first segment. If Ole Miss won the game, it's not an upset. Ohio State, we all know that the athletes can kind of go 1 for 1 there. And then what happens on the other side of the bracket where there's some players and teams that can make some noise. I'm curious to see exactly what it looks like. But Georgia's schedule on the road has been incredibly soft this year. It isn't a situation like Ole Miss that went to Athens. Athens is an incredibly difficult place to play football. Georgia went to Tennessee, and that's a difficult place to play, but it's right there on the border. You can bus to it. It's not a true road trip. Ole Miss went to Kentucky. I would put Kentucky up against Florida. Heck, Kentucky beat Florida. I'd put Kentucky up against Mississippi State. They both played road games at Mississippi State. You know, I would put Kentucky up against Auburn. Kentucky beat Auburn. I'm just saying it's a weird road trip whenever this is your first time to take a major road trip. Ole Miss has already been to Lexington and already been to Athens. They've done the road thing. What will Georgia do in a similar situation? Then you add on all the other intangibles that I talked about yesterday, and that is no team that has won in the regular season has won a Sugar Bowl rematch multiple times, including Ole Miss, 1959, the Billy Cannon team. They came back in the Sugar Bowl, beat LSU 21-0. Game of the century, LSU won 9-6. They lost to Alabama 21-0 and didn't cross the 20-yard or 50-yard line. It's different. It's weird. There's intangibles at play. There's the fact that Georgia has not played a game since December 6th. By the time the football game is played, it's going to be 4 weeks, 28 days, to where you've just basically had another fall camp or spring practice, however you want to look at it. Players hate bye weeks because of all of that. Now, you get to get a little bit healthier. That's probably a good thing, and they need it to do that. There's going to be some guys on the field that they haven't had potentially, but there is just the rust and the dust that has to get knocked off. And Ole Miss played just a couple days ago. It's a normal week. They've knocked that dust off. You're going to see a better version in this playoff game than you saw in week 1, because in my opinion, the second playoff game like this, especially in the system that we have, is like the second game in a regular season. Kind of like no team improves more from the first to the second game than they do from the first to the second game. I think that is something that people need to pay attention to as well. It'll be interesting. I think that if Ole Miss can stop the run, and Georgia runs the ball extremely well, but let's just say we go from 230 yards to where Georgia runs for 150. Just that. If you do that right there, Ole Miss is going to win the game. That is the X factor, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on this week when we do the keys, and we're going to talk about it in the what to watch for on Monday as well. So it should be completely interesting to see how that goes. Anyway, in our final segment, Ole Miss enters this game with absolutely zero pressure, and that gives them the freedom to play loose and fearless. We'll explain why that matters next. All right, one thing that's interesting to see is Ole Miss has a complete free shot. We talked about this yesterday on the show. Total free shot to where you walk into the game and the whole national narrative is not expecting you to win the game, even though you are good enough. As we talked about in the first segment, you're good enough to win this game. ESPN's FPI has you winning 2 out of every 5. That's a 3-2 split between Georgia and Ole Miss in a game as far as win probability goes. Other advanced metrics sets it up at like 55% Georgia win probability, which is even less than that. So Ole Miss can win this game. It shouldn't be considered an upset if they do. But the national narrative and everybody talking about what Ole Miss has and how Ole Miss is a total joke and outclassed and all of that stuff, that is going to allow this Ole Miss football team to, A, play free. Completely free. No pressure whatsoever. All the pressure in this game are on the Georgia Bulldogs. And they expect to win a national championship this year. That's what they're playing for. Ole Miss is playing to keep playing. There's a difference there. When it's national championship or bust, there's the pressure of actually making it to that game and winning it. Ole Miss playing to keep playing means that they get celebration after every single result because they get to do this again. They get to do this with each other again. They get to enjoy this moment again. It's not a destination-based goal. It's about a journey-based goal. And because of that, Ole Miss comes out and plays free. And you saw that against Tulane. They scored in 59 seconds on the first drive. They scored 14 points in their first 7 plays. They were completely locked in against a team that they beat 45-10 over the course of the season. They could have scored 70 points in that game. They took their foot off the gas, and I get it, but they did. Against the Georgia Bulldogs, you get to go out and play free, let it roll. Handle the extreme physicality that Georgia is going to present because they do that. And you're going to go as far, just like I said in July and August, this Ole Miss football team is going to go as far as the front 7 takes them. Period. It's going to come down to something so simple in this football game that's just ridiculous. But if that front 7 bottles up the Georgia run game, which they did in 2024, they were unable to do it in 2025 in the first matchup, and they were unable to do it in 2023. But if Ole Miss can bottle up that run game in the Superdome in New Orleans, just hold them to 150 yards for the game. Put it more on Gunnar Stockton's shoulders to make plays downfield. You're going to win the game. You're going to advance to Glendale to play the winner of the Miami-Ohio State game in a national semifinal, if you can do that. And this freedom that Ole Miss has to play with, that they seemingly want this, means they're going to play a little bit more physical. They're not going to be surprised by the extreme physicality of the Georgia Bulldogs. They know exactly what's coming and what they have to do. They're going to tackle better. They're going to be locked in. They're going to know their assignments. They're not going to be as many busts. All of that is the result of a team that is not playing with pressure. A team that just knows their assignment and they just react. They're just reacting on the football field. And because of that, and all of this, if Ole Miss wins the Sugar Bowl, not an upset. Not an upset at all. Not even remotely close to an upset. And that is pretty cool stuff. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas Eve. We're banking some episodes because this weekend is my 25th wedding anniversary celebration. So we're driving up to do Christmas and the wedding celebration. I'm going to be back here Monday to do it, but we're going to try and set this all up. So there might be some repetitive stuff. I apologize for that, but I do want to put out some content for people to listen to. We have Bill Flowers. We have Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, hopping on. We're going to get Michael Katz. We're going to talk to the mayor of Corinth, just so everybody has something while they're driving around as well. It should be a lot of fun to see what happens in the Sugar Bowl. And I imagine that as it gets closer, I'm going to have a ton of feels. And I'm curious to know exactly what New Year's Day is going to feel like at like 2:00 in the afternoon. It's going to be an amazing day. And we'll see exactly how it goes. We're about 8 days out from the Sugar Bowl, and tickets are going fast. It's genuinely, everybody I've talked to is going to that game. So I don't know if they're going to get tickets to the game, but it feels like they're going to be in New Orleans. So there's going to be a lot of red and blue out and about in New Orleans. So should be pretty interesting. Anyway, thanks for tuning in to today's Locked On Ole Miss. We'll continue to talk about Ole Miss and Georgia all week. So make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you get all the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels as well. And did Locked On Ole Miss make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our National Locked On Network account on any social platform, and we will drop you that code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we will send you the first ever National Locked On Podcast Network 24/7 YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you get a second listen. It could be Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy. Hotty toddy, everybody. We're about a week away from the biggest college football game in Ole Miss history. And that is a really cool thing. Anyway, take care. Hotty toddy.